If you're thinking about buying a home, this video is for you. Hi, I'm Geraldine Ciaccia. I am a real estate agent based in Hoboken, New Jersey. You're excited, you're thinking about buying a home, but you have a lot of questions. Today, I'm going to go over the buyer's roadmap and the steps that you need to take if you're thinking about buying a home. If you'd like to connect with me and go a little deeper on your specific situation, there are multiple options in the description for us to connect. The first thing you need to do is meet with a real estate agent. I might suggest you also meet with your lender in parallel, but the first recommendation I have is to speak to a real estate agent and just get a feel as to what the market is like. Once you've had that conversation, shortly thereafter, your agent will most likely recommend lenders for you. It is critical that you get your pre-approval right away. I will tell you, it's a pretty arduous task. It's not difficult, but they require a lot of information from you. So it's always a great idea to get that done and out of the way. And there are a couple of benefits to do that. The first benefit is you're going to know how much you can afford. You're going to know what a bank will actually give you to purchase a home. Even though you might have a good feel on your finances, it's always a good idea to understand what the bank thinks. The second part, and probably equally as important, is we cannot submit an offer on a home unless you are pre-approved. So we could go look at homes and you might fall in love with the property, but if you're rushing around to get your pre-approval for us to submit your offer, you might miss out on that home. And we don't want you to be in a situation where you miss out on a home because you didn't do your due diligence beforehand. So I cannot overemphasize how important it is that you get your pre-approval before we look at homes. The next step is we'll talk a little bit more after you get your pre-approval about what your requirements are. And depending on where you are, I will set you up on a search in my portal. But if you're looking to buy a home today or tomorrow, then I'm going to be more involved in your search. I'm going to look at the properties that are hitting the market and reach out to you if I see something that matches your criteria. Now, you will also get these alerts, but depending on where you are in the home buying process, I'm going to be heavily involved. Now, I'd like to add though, as your real estate agent, the biggest value that I bring to you is not finding your home. There are a lot of portals out there to do that. I'm not saying that I don't find homes for my clients often. I do, because I'm very familiar with the area. So I know after speaking with you what you're looking for and what would be a good fit. But a lot of times I have clients find their homes on Zillow or other portals, and that's totally fine. At the end of the day, the goal here is to find a home that you want to purchase. If you're thinking of buying a home in the future, so you're not buying a home today or tomorrow, then a lot of times I don't get too involved in the search portal. I set it up for you, but I will just check in with you every couple of months to find out where you are. And when you are ready, like I said, I will dive deep. I will get alerts sent to me, and I will reach out to you and give you a more personalized experience than just simplistic alerts on a portal. Once you're ready to look at homes, we'll pick a few to go look at. And ideally, if you're really serious about buying a home, it shouldn't really take you more than 1 to 4 times for us to go out together. At that point, you find a property you like, and then I will put together the offer. Now, some of the terms we want to discuss in this offer are: what is your purchase price? What is the down payment that you want to provide after attorney review? When is your closing date? Typically, the closing date is anywhere from 30 to 60 days from the date that we write the contract. In order to place an offer, it's actually in contract form. But don't worry, because even when you and the seller agree on a price that everybody signs, that contract does become binding, but you have 3 days to have an attorney cancel that. But we'll get back to that in a second. I'll submit the offer to the seller's agent, and she'll discuss it with her seller. 2 things can happen. The seller can counter back with another number, or the seller can accept. Now, there is a third. The seller may not reply, but ideally we're working with a reasonable seller, and the seller will come back with a number. Once everybody agrees on a price, it might require me to redraft the contract with a new sales price, but then once we put out that contract with the correct sales price, the one that everybody agreed to, you'll sign, and then the seller will sign. At that point, you're in a binding contract. The contract will be set to your attorney. I have attorneys that I share with my clients that I like to work with. So I would give you that list beforehand for you to pick the attorney that you'd like to work with. So then what will happen is the buyer's attorney will cancel the contract pending the attorney review letter. Every deal goes like this. And I had said earlier that you do have those 3 days to cancel the contract once everybody signs. That's the reality. It is going to be canceled. In addition to the contract terms that were in there to protect you, your attorney is going to put together what we call an addendum or a rider to the contract. Now we'll have additional protections for you. That's usually another negotiation point where we go back and forth with the seller's attorney to come up with the final terms. And ultimately the goal is for everybody to agree to the terms that are in the rider, and then everybody signs off and it becomes an executed contract. Just to give you perspective, one of the items that will go into the rider is if you are working with a lender and you need to get financing, believe it or not, financing is a contingency, but the appraisal is not. So a lot of times your attorney will put that the property needs to appraise. At this point, like I said, once everybody signs off on the rider, you are officially under contract. The interesting thing about this though, and I always share this with my clients, my buyers, when you are looking for a home right now in the current market, when you're in a seller's market, the buyer is in a vulnerable position during attorney review. You want to get in and out as fast as possible. On the other hand, the seller is actually in a great position during the attorney review because they can still entertain other offers. And this is probably more of a New Jersey thing based on what I've heard. No other state does this. But in New Jersey, as a buyer, until you're under contract, until you're out of attorney review, you're in a very vulnerable position. So the goal is to get in and out of attorney review as quick as possible so you are under contract. And once you're under contract, nobody can take this property away from you. You are in a binding contract, and even if the seller got an offer, $20,000 more than your offer, the seller is in a contract with you and he or she cannot get out. Interestingly enough, once you're under contract, the tables kind of turn, because once you're under contract as a buyer, you have contingencies. And typically the contingencies are the home inspection, so that home has to be sound when a home inspector goes through it. You also do have to get your financing. So even if we didn't have that appraisal, you still have two contingencies that have to be met. I've had this happen where buyers just get up and leave because they found something wrong with the home that just wasn't going to work for them and they cancel the contract. So like I said, it's a very vulnerable position as a seller, but once you're under contract, you as the buyer have a little more control. I had mentioned earlier that you do have to send in payment, so there's a deposit you have to provide. That usually occurs 10 days after attorney review. So when we were putting together the contract, you have to get that deposit to the seller's attorney. Sometimes it's a title company, but typically it's a seller's attorney, and your attorney will let you know where it needs to go. Typically, this deposit could be anywhere from 2.5% to 5% to 10%. And depending on how competitive the market is, it may even be 20%. And the idea is this deposit is showing the seller that you're serious. Now, the reality is if you cancel the contract, in most cases, you can get that deposit back. It just shows that if you're putting that money up front, you're a strong buyer. So when we're working together, one of the triggers that when we talk about making your offer competitive would be to up your deposit. The higher your deposit, the better your offer looks to a seller. Another way to make your offer more attractive is to not necessarily waive the appraisal, but offer that you would cover a gap. So if the home you're buying was $1 million, that's the purchase price. You put it in for $1 million. Property appraises for $980,000, but you said that if there was a $10,000 gap, you would cover it. You'd be okay with $990,000, and then that $10,000 would be another discussion point. So just because a property doesn't appraise, it doesn't mean that the deal gets killed. There's an opportunity to negotiate further with the seller on the price, and it may be that you just say, you know what, I know I said $10,000, but I'm okay with paying the $1 million. So it's really up to you. Again, it's another discussion point. It's another opportunity to figure out really if this is the right home for you. And then when it comes to the home inspection, this one's an interesting one because I would never recommend that you waive your home inspection. inspection. You should always do a home inspection. But a lot of times when you're buying a condo, the opportunity for something not to be working is very low. As opposed to waiving the home inspection, you can also, again, there's additional triggers. And these are things we go over when we meet and we're placing an offer. But a trigger would be, for example, as opposed to waiving the home inspection, you could say that if there is an issue that costs under $1,000, I, as the buyer, am okay with covering it. But anything that costs over $1,000, I want the seller covered. So that's a way to work with the home inspection contingency and to make your offer stand out. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is show the seller that you don't plan on nickeling and diming them. But let's be for real. If there's a scratch in the hardwood floors, normal wear and tear, that's home ownership. But just by saying that you're not going to nickel and dime and you show clearly with the home inspection contingency by waiving up to say $1,000 each item, you're showing the seller. So it's more than just talk, it's actually showing. When I work with buyers, I like to explain to them my BCW formula. And the way it works with a home inspection is you have cosmetic things, which we talked about, like scratch on the hardwood floors, scratch on a kitchen cabinet. And those are things you really can't submit as a buyer. I mean, you could, but the reality is the seller will most likely reject them. And just to be clear, you can submit for anything in the home inspection, but cosmetic, not so much. The next category is broken. So that's the B for broken. Broken is something that's clearly broken, like it doesn't operate. Those are items that you can submit for the home inspection. And it's really, honestly, it's not up for debate. If it's broken, pretty much 99% of the time, the seller does have to fix it. I mean, the seller could say no, that's always the case. But as a buyer, asking for something that's broken is a very legitimate request, and I highly recommend you do that. The last one is W for worn. And worn is where it becomes a little sticky, because worn could just be something that's old, and the seller could say, well, it works, but it's old. It looks like it's on its last leg. So that one becomes more of a sticking point. One of the most common items that we see in the W category, the worn category, is the water heater. And I guess it's interesting because W for water heater, and worn. But the water heater is one of those things that a lot of times we do see home inspectors say that it needs to be replaced. And I will tell you that if your water heater is old, there is a potential for it leaking. And depending on what floor it's on, that could become a real disaster, especially if you're in a condo, because what will happen is the water heater will leak down to the apartment below you. So that'll be a disaster. I actually lived in a building where there was a water heater for the entire building, and the whole thing busted. Luckily, it didn't hit my floor, but it hit all the floors below it. It was on the top floor, on the 5th floor. So, it does happen. I've seen it in a condo that I owned. There was a slow leak, and it had a little bit of damage in the condo below me. But again, usually if a water heater is over, say, 10 years old, home inspector is going to mark that as worn. It needs to be replaced. I would like to add that if there were issues in the home inspection that required a second look, we would actually go back before the closing to check them out. But normally what happens is the seller is asked to provide some sort of documentation via their attorney to your attorney to confirm that all the issues have been resolved. Once, like I said, all the contingencies are satisfied, and that includes the contingencies for your lender has all their details that they need for you to close, then you will get a notification from your lender that says clear to close. And that means you are ready to go. So the day of the closing, we do a final walkthrough. It could be to double check things that were supposed to be fixed during the home inspection, but a lot of times it's really, did a tree fall on the house? Did something fall through the window? It's more a formality, but there are times where we are in there to inspect and make sure things have been resolved. And then after we're done, go to your attorney's office, you sign paperwork. It usually takes about an hour. And then once you're done, you get the keys to the castle and you are a homeowner.